Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. A few days ago, the rug was pulled under our feet by President Donald Trump, especially with an executive order suspending the funding by USAID. When you look at it, you imagine what exactly happened and what is at stake. $40 billion, about 1% of the US budget there, was at stake. 10,000 staff at stake there. But most especially, things like education, health, civil societies and NGOs. What is the fate, especially moving forward? 90 days or permanently? That is something that we're questioning here. But also, is it time to cut ties with the aid trap, or are we as a country looking for ways to find better ways to make money to develop this economy? That's the conversation tonight, and you can be part of the conversation. Go to our number 0709 60 25 92. That's for WhatsApp and text, or our YouTube channel to let us know what you think. Let me introduce the distinguished panel that is putting perspective to this discussion. Our very own Professor Sarah Sali, the director at the Institute of Gender and Development Studies at Makerere University, is with us this evening. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers.
It is also an honor to give you your flowers.
Thank you.
It's been a while that you've been away, but congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you very much.
At some point, I hope we can have coffee later.
Hopefully, yes.
Next to the professor is Godba Tumshabe, who is a policy analyst, a director at the Great Lakes Institute of Strategic Studies, is with us this evening. Good evening, Godba, and it's good to have you.
A great pleasure to be here. Good evening, our viewers.
Hosting you for the first time. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Dr. James Magara, the CEO and founder of Jubilee Dental Clinics there. Good evening, good evening, Doctor, and it's good to have you.
Good evening, viewers. Good to be here.
And thank you for also gracing us. It's the first time we're hosting you in a long time.
My pleasure.
Next to Doctor is the Permanent Secretary and the Secretary to the Treasury at the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Ramadan Gobi. Good evening, sir, and it's good to have you.
Always a pleasure to be back here.
And that's exactly what I was going to say.
Thank you.
Welcome back. And this is normally the season you show up, budgeting till we get through it. Thank you for honoring our invite.
This is when you invite me.
So we should call you for the other political issues also. Okay. Lastly but not least, Professor Dr. Ezra Suruma. I should say guru in finance, economics, academia, and generally someone we look up to. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, viewers. Good evening.
It's a pleasure to have you. And so I saw some tweets coming through saying we can't wait for the wisdom going to ooze from there. So I hope you keep us on track. This week we got news of the appointment of both the governor and the deputy governor. Congratulations to both Dr. Michael Atiga Ego and also Professor Augustus Nwagaba. Both became governor and deputy governors at Bank of Uganda. It's about 2 or more years that we have not had the governor. We have had an acting one in that place. So we'll start with the flowers to them, and I'll come straight to the people that know them best. I'll start with Dr. Suruma and the PSST to be able to give us what their thoughts are, especially in the trajectory of our economy with the two gentlemen. Dr. Suruma, over to you.
Yeah, it's certainly a great pleasure that we have a governor now and his deputy, Dr. Tingo Ego, worked with me when I was director of research. He was one of my staff. I'm glad to see that he has risen to the pinnacle of the central bank. He's a very competent man and man of integrity. I'm very happy for him, and I congratulate him on his appointment. Professor Nwagaba is a distinguished scholar, and I believe that the two of them will be a great asset to our country, and I look forward to working with them.
Thank you very much. PSST, these are two gentlemen, one you have been working with, one both in the academia, you were with them. How do you see them fit into moving this economy in the direction of the 15 years that you have projected?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, in the past 4 years, nearly 4 years, I've been working with Michael Tingego serving as deputy governor, but also performing the duties of the governor. You know, there is no position like acting governor at the central bank. The constitution is clear. When the governor is not there, the deputy governor will perform the duties. And we've had a very, very good relationship. Our policies are well coordinated, the fiscal policy from my side and the monetary policy from his side. And it's really very heartwarming that we are continuing to working together, and now as the full governor of the bank. But also the addition of Professor Nwagaba, very enthusiastic about especially transformative economics. And there we have our minds meeting. We are very delighted at Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development to having two gentlemen whom we are going to work with to ensure that we accelerate the growth and the transformation of the economy of Uganda. As you are aware, we have our tenfold growth strategy, which now we are implementing. We have a brand new National Development Plan 4, which is going to guide us. And also we have a relatively new central bank strategic plan. And they are all aligned, very well aligned. It's really fantastic. Recently, the central bank changed a bit its kind of vision, its mission, inserting in those two beautiful words, socio-economic transformation. And I'm very happy that we are having a team that is likely to tick and ensure that we get there.
Dr. Magara, you are at the pinnacle, especially of transformative leadership, especially training young leaders and also leaders at various areas there. When you look at these two gentlemen taking on the pinnacle of Bank of Uganda, your thoughts about this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate them. I know them personally through engagements on various fora. Not in the economics field, so I will not comment on that side. But I think they have not just the technical expertise, but from my interactions with them, they have the character that would help in being in such a position. So I really wish them the best. These are turbulent times. You need people who can have their hands steady on the job. And I believe these two would have what it takes to manage that very big institution. So all the best to them.
Thank you. Godba, a few days ago, Bank of Uganda hit with cyber attacks there. One of those cycles that has been around for a while. These two people come in really from the frying pan to the fire itself. Your thoughts on how they will navigate these waters?
No, first of all, just to congratulate the two gentlemen, the governor and my brother and friend Augustus Nwagaba. These are fairly accomplished gentlemen. Mr. Tingego, we are not known to each other very well at a personal level, but I'm very closely associated with Augustus Nwagaba. We've done some work together. We share a lot of thinking in terms of the transformation agenda. Actually, I think that the last time we did a specific assignment together is the time when him and I and Professor Grace Bantebia were writing the CHOGAM, the technical background paper for the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth and Heads of State Summit. That's 2007. And so I can attest to Augustus's passion for transformation, for absolute discipline in terms of how you approach economic growth and transformation. Of course, as you mentioned, they are coming in at a time when the central bank has had that problem to do with the money that was, siphoned out of the bank, and Minister of Finance. I think that's an investigation that is still ongoing. My only caution, though, is that the bank has gone on for the last almost 3 years now without a governor in substantive terms. So normally when these kinds of appointments come up, my question is always like, okay, what is going to change? Because we've had the bank running with the deputy governor in charge. So I would want to, for me to even give them flowers, I would want to hear whatever agenda they are going to deliver to the country, that they can communicate a transformation agenda that goes beyond what they have been doing, and I think probably the one positive thing that I know is that these two gentlemen have a good working relationship with Minister of Finance, because I think that one of my biggest challenge has always been Minister of Finance and Bank of Uganda, that the Bank of Uganda is focusing on macroeconomic stability, trying to control money in the economy, but on the micro level, on the fiscal side of things, we need to be able to inject money into the economy to address very serious problems. So the convergence of macro and fiscal policy there has been a major challenge. I hope now with Ramadan there and these gentlemen in the bank, I hope we can find that convergence, because I think there is, for me, when I speak as an everyday person, as a farmer from Ntungamo, that I feel the pain of, and the teacher from Makerere. Yeah. So I feel like there is always the policies, the macro and the physical, they don't speak to me as a person or as a citizen who is every single day trying to deal with issues of access to finance, for example, in terms of the kinds of activities that the economic activities that we engage in.
Finally, Professor Sarah, both the governor and the deputy are here. We're heading towards elections. Your thoughts on them navigating both the economic policy, the monetary policy, and the physical policy, even as we get into this?
Yeah, thank you, Timothy. For starters, of course, I don't know the current governor. I don't know him very well, apart from seeing him when he came with Ramadan for the Mutevile lecture. But for Professor Nwagaba, one, he taught me when I was an undergrad. Then we were colleagues together in the Faculty of Social Sciences. We have researched together. I know him as a very disciplined person. And coming from the social into the economics, he is a person who has been very passionate about poverty eradication, although he has been doing it largely like at community and household level, and as a Rotarian and as a born-again Christian. He has been very passionate about these things. Of course, he did have a stint in politics, so I think he will understand how the politics is likely to affect macroeconomic stability. But I also know that, well, he's going to be operating at macro level. But being a person who is passionate about and who has always critiqued how macroeconomic policies affect micro level economics, I'm sure he's going to go with that hat into what he's doing. And you asked on how that relates with the politics. We are going into the politics. I believe there are rules and policies that govern fiscal and monetary policies. And I imagine the governor and the deputy governor are going to play by these rules. And regardless of the context of whether we are in politics or out of politics, there are certain benchmarks they have to meet. Okay. So I don't see this being a serious challenge, but it is something they have to work with. Because we don't want to imagine that there's been nothing, so they're coming to do wonders. This is a country which has been running, and this country has policies around those issues. So they're coming to fit in and to bring the best of themselves to even making it better.
Thank you very much. And we wish both gentlemen all the best as they take the bull by the horns. They'll be supported by the PSST who is here. And we wish that the economy gets to the Uganda we desire. All the best to them. Let's switch gears to our conversation tonight. USAID suspends funding, especially in terms of aid. We're talking about $40 billion, about 1% of the US budget there. And we're talking about programs like PEPFAR that came around that has supported over 20 million people with HIV and supporting them with ARVs there. We're also talking about FuseNet, which has been able to help with detection of famine in the Horn of Africa and Africa itself generally. But also we look at what was imposed or brought about in 2013 with an executive order of George W. Bush there that has also supported. This was introduced in 1961 by JF Kennedy as an executive order, but now in 2025, Trump has slapped the brakes on it. What does that mean for us as a country? Especially if you look at education, health has been heavily reliant on that, but also civil society and NGOs. There's a lot of propaganda going around it, but we will speak to the facts and what implications it means for us as a country. Let me get to Dr. Siruma first and foremost. Doctor, when you heard about this suspension, you have been at the helm of steering our economy, steering the education, really having a big picture, an overarching picture of what happens in the country. What did you make of it?
I have to confess that this was rather shocking. It's, as you said, this program started in 1962 or 61. I was in, I think, senior one at that time. And I remember clearly these programs coming to Uganda and being involved in various activities. Americans were coming to Uganda for the first time. We had only known the British until that time. And we welcomed this American coming into our country, bringing very kinds of programs, Peace Corps and so on. I myself got a scholarship to go to America after I finished senior 4. So we've known these programs for obviously a very long time. So I couldn't help being shocked that not only that it was stopped, but the method in which it was stopped.
Yes.
It was, you know, when you have a friend, you can say, well, by the way, things are not going right now, so we may be scaling down our assistance to you, so please get ready. But there's no preparation here. It just comes like a bombshell, stop. And, but what is interesting is that it's not only outside in the aid receiving countries, but even at home in America, it's also stopped. So this kind of method of work is not, we are not very familiar with it. Normally we expect some kind of discussion on the table and say, well, we're going to scale down and this is the amount of time we are allowing you to kind of close shop. But now here we are, and I have to say it is disruptive. And so our capacity to adjust, when the shock, sometimes shock is a good thing in waking you up to the reality. And there's no doubt that we are being shaken and shocked, but I hope we can survive the shock. Because as you said, in areas of health, like PEPFAR, certainly if we have to find, PSST is here, you tell us what he's doing to find alternative sources of funding. We have to make sure that medicines, life-saving medicines are available to our people. So it is very discomforting, it's hard, and it's telling us that don't continue to rely on foreign aid. Be sure that you can be on your own when it needs to be that.
Thank you very much. PSST, how did you receive this news? Because now the things you've been fighting for, employment seems to be going back, health seems to be going in deficit. How did you receive this news? And we'll talk about the response later.
Thank you. I don't know why in Uganda we don't learn from the past, because we've had a number of these kind of shocks. But Uganda is a wonderful country, very resilient. And also, I think because we are God-fearing, there's a way Uganda tends to stay afloat when doom is actually projected or stuff like that. You remember when COVID had hit the world around the beginning of 2020, everybody, everywhere was predicting a terrible situation. They actually said in Africa you are going to see bodies, we shall be jumping bodies everywhere. We have the most horrible healthcare system, and so on and so forth. What happened? We actually had fewer people dying compared to most of these countries that used to think that they have the most robust healthcare systems. Fast forward, recently, about a year ago, the World Bank gave us a note around August of 2023 that we are stopping our support to Uganda. Don't bring new projects to the board of the World Bank because you have written a bad law. And many people, journalists, brought a forest of microphones in front of me wherever they could see me. What are you going to do? Are we not finished? I told them, well, Uganda is a very resilient country. Trust me, the sky will stay up there, and the sky stayed up there. Now it's a year plus, and we are growing. The economy actually grew by 6.1% end of June last year, and we project it to grow between 6.4 and 7% this year. Having said that, we have these partners who support us, particularly in the social sector, in the human capital development. And most of their support is off budget. It does not pass through the government, except very little money. I received a letter from our partners, our friends, last week also, I think, informing me that you had projected or released about 2.39 billion shillings. Unfortunately, we shall be unable to release it to the referral hospitals. 2.39 billion shillings, not dollars, please. I know you enjoy dollars. And I told colleagues we need to get a stopgap measure to ensure that this is catered for. But as well, interacted with my colleague, the PS of Ministry of Health, to see that we can establish the off-budget support that comes in or has been coming in from the US in particular, but also other sources. You know, sometimes US has funds through other implementing partners, and then we see what to do. And this is what we've been establishing, the support they have been giving us in the area of human resource, especially some of our medical or health workers who are remunerated by the money from them. And then the life-saving and essential medicines. The good thing is, Timothy, we had anticipated these reductions in support, and as government we are stepping up every year the contribution to some of these areas, especially the purchase of essential and life-saving medicine. For example, ARVs, we are now at about 200 billion shillings. We actually have zero impact if, for example, that was stopped. The good news is we have also received reports that those have been put aside. They are going to continue, the life-saving and the essential medicines. So we are mainly assessing other areas where this could impact us. So in summary, like the senior said here, it's not good manners to be shocked or to shock others. But shocking Uganda also is not very easy, because we are a very resilient country, and we know how to survive. And I want to assure you, as government, we shall do whatever it takes to ensure that Ugandans are safe.
We'll come back to that. Let me come to Dr. Magara. As a health practitioner, areas like malaria, TB, we're talking about Ebola now, we're talking about monkeypox that are around now, 13,000 medical workers. How does the health sector receive such shocking news?
Thank you. Maybe just broad comments before I get into that. As the PSST has said, it's a shock, yes, but he asked the question, why don't we learn? And I think this is another opportunity for us as a country to look at our economics. The U.S. has been, if you look back at the history from the 1960s, you know that when Kennedy set up this fund, it was really to drive the U.S. Humanitarian side of aid. Over the years, things have changed. And I think what has become quite clear is this has been a tool of, this aid has become a tool of foreign policy to control nations and stuff like that. So looking at what has happened now, it's time for us to really look at, consider, I'm not being looking more from the professional side and also from the domestic. Just a few days ago, I had a patient who was directly affected come to see me. And they couldn't afford something they were going to do, so they had to change. Now, that shock that came to the nation has also come to many families. Now, I'll try to simplify things from that angle. What happens if you suddenly have your domestic income cut? You've got to adjust. You've got to adjust and decide, look at how can we increase our income as a family? What are the things we have to do away with, we have to cut out? Now, you scale that up to a nation. I think this is what we are faced with. And I don't know how many families want to be in a state where every month you are depending on maybe 20% of your budget is being supported by somebody else. One of the statements I've make is that none of us is busy looking at how to develop our neighbor's plot. That would be very interesting if you found someone who's really very keen on making sure your plot does well. Even these countries that come to help us, yes, they come with some help, but they have agendas. And I think this, what has come out, when you read the documents, I happened to read I just read the 29-page document by the Trump transition team. They were arguing about this aid, and you could, if you had a copy of that document, you knew exactly what was going to happen. And they did it very quickly because they also knew their system. They knew the bureaucracy that can slow things down. They planned it very, very well. All these guys were ready. They had got all there's another document I read which showed how they executed it so quickly that no one could stop it. By the time people woke up, it was done. And the good thing is not, as has been said, it's not. They're reviewing it. They're going to adjust, and from what I've read, if they keep their word, I think it's going to give us a lot of opportunities, because their approach is different from what I'm reading. They want to see nations self-sufficient. But then back to your question, it's the same thing. We've got to look again. It's a shock, yes, but maybe now the PSST has already told us that the government has already been preparing for it. But if it happened to an individual, you adjust, where you have to have your money, you have to cut out from some places and make sure that the critical areas are taken care of. So certainly, yes, they did have a very big support to the health sector. Quite a big part of, not coming through the budget, but a lot of money was channeled. I think their policy has been not to put the money directly through government. But a lot of support for, mentioned PEPFAR, and many other projects that they've been carrying out. So time to re-examine and see where the resources will come from, and also plan for ourselves. My hope is that these shocks will really wake us up and put us in a place where we really try to get out the rat hole we are in. The rat hole we are in is not only national, it's the whole African continent. The debt trap that we're in, something has to happen to free us. Otherwise, we'll constantly be going with our begging baskets to get to cover the places which we cannot cover ourselves. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maga. Godba, he talks about foreign policy. This was an arm. First it began as development, but you were in the civil society space, both the NGOs there. Who are the winners and losers, especially with this freeze of USAID funding that is coming through?
I think, Timothy, I would want to put this at a much more probably strategic level, not the winners and the losers element. Because first of all, I think I agree with the doctor's rumor that the disruption, the erratic nature of the decision is not what is expected of partners. Because these guys tell us they are development partners. Now when you are development partners, you can have your changes within your own country. But I think discipline demands that you really take a more nuanced approach to do the things that you want to reform. But the shock and awe strategy that Trump and Elon Musk have executed really is kind of like disturbing and destabilizing. Not only here, but also in the US. I think even in the US, most of the institutions, the states, they're all struggling like all of us actually. So I think that's really, for me, it's a bit erratic for a country as big as the US to be operating like that. But secondly, I think the other important point for us to note is that we shouldn't be shocked as much, because if we engaged in scenarios analysis, actually we would see this coming, because the changes in the donor architecture, in the financing architecture, started way back in 2011. That's when the changes started coming. We were discussing that within the civil society, seeing that actually at that time you had the emergence of ultra-right regimes around the world, including in Europe. So most of them were cutting down on their foreign assistance. Many of them were cutting down on embassies, including even in some of the countries like the Scandinavian countries. They scaled down on their embassy staff. So you could see this coming, and those changes have been happening over time. But also again for Trump, if someone was really paying attention to the US elections, one needs to have predicted that if Trump won, because that's a scenario that will run. If Trump won, definitely the actions he's taking were broadcast for a long time in his campaign. So I should have been, the one would have to prepare. And I think maybe that's why Ramadan is saying, no, we are probably prepared. The third point that I would make is really divert a bit from what Ramadan said about our preparedness. I think at a macro level, you can feel the stability in the system. At a micro level, my view is that you don't see it. And I can just point to just a few examples. So you go to the protracted debate about the payment of interns. Interns are a core of our medical professionals. They graduate and do internship and graduate into the profession. The kind of discussion we've had about payment of interns, whether to pay them, whether we have the money or not, is so disruptive in terms of the way you build your medical professional workforce, that if we were prepared and we had the money, we shouldn't be having that debate unless the debate is political. The second one is the point that I raise all the time, and I'm sure, Ramadan, you guys in finance, you know about this, that when you look at the education data from UBOS, right from 1997, when universal primary education was introduced, up to 2023, that's the data that I've been able to collect, there are approximately 26 million plus children that did not reach primary 7. So in other words, the kids that register in P1 and those who sit for PROE at P7, 26 plus million children. That's basically half of Uganda's population. Now, my view is that a country that is prepared would definitely be looking at this. You wouldn't be in a position where you have almost half of your population, they have not completed 7 years of school. So at the macro level, you see a certain level of stability. At the micro level, you don't feel that, these changes in financing, in foreign assistance, are not actually affecting us. I think as doctors, as you said, at the micro level, these things affect individuals, they affect households, they affect sectors, and so the preparedness that we are talking about needs to be seen in a much more dynamic manner. Yes. So I think that essentially that's one of the three things that I would raise. But in terms of the winners and losers, I don't think that there are winners and losers in this game. My view is that the US, I think someone said this, and in the US, this is not a charity. These countries, they are not engaged in charity. They are not doing us a favor. They have their missions, they have their policies, they want to pursue them. Foreign aid is more of what you would call soft power. That for them to engage here, to trade, to do certain things, to get our buy-in into their programs, they have to be supporting us. So this is not something that that should be looked at as charity. In most cases, when we talk about this, because it's called aid, it's like someone is doing you a favor. But this is not a favor. They have what they are pursuing. My view is that on our side, whether it is government, whether it's some of us who are in the private sector and non-government sector, when you are negotiating with these guys, you have to be prepared to be able to negotiate without giving in. And I know from my experience that it is doable. So the losers, we will lose. And maybe I should mention in a more provocative way, I should mention that for me, I'm happy that these guys are cutting this money. Because I believe that if we decided as a country, we can actually use our money more prudently to be able to prepare ourselves and get ourselves out of this trap. The money we spend on the presidency, the money we spend on the legislature, the money we spend on this extensive public administration system, I think that if the Minister of Finance people had the political space, because I know they don't have the political space, if they had the political space and were saying, you need to focus our money where it could get the optimum value, I think that we would walk out of this aid trap much faster than we are doing. So probably Trump's actions could be a good wake-up call for us. the only challenge is whether we actually, whether we've learned. Because let me just conclude this way, that from the COVID experience that Ramadan described very aptly, the commitment really from the political class was like, we're going to change things. I think the only thing they would now talk about is the RAPEX, the rationalization of government agencies. Actually, one of my colleagues said, you see, now in the US, Trump is rationalizing government agencies, but Uganda, we did it first. And my response was that no, Trump is trying to see where the leakages are, trying to close the taps that leak money. For us, we just went and rationalized agencies. Where there isn't a lot of spending. Most of these things are like Export Promotion Board, Free Zones, or something. These are normally agencies that spend maybe some 50 billion, at most 100 billion. But the guzzlers of our money, the presidency, the legislature, and some of those other spending centers, nobody has touched them. So if we had an Elon Musk, he would start by looking at the treasury, how much money, Ramadan, do you send to State House? We would block it. How much do you send to Parliament? We would just, those are the things we would be looking at, and then we would say, that's the equivalence. But otherwise, I think that what is happening now is good for us. I would want a situation where the guys in Ministry of Finance and elsewhere spend sleepless nights trying to fix the problem and get us out of the aid trap, because this has gone on for far too long.
And we'll come back to that point of soft power and what it means to the change of the foreign policy there. But Professor, coming to you, especially on the areas that Dr. Magara hinted on, the people that are on administrative leave as we speak, it has even hit close at home in Makerere with IDI. People are on administrative leave, some people have lost work. If 10,000 people have lost jobs and only 300 are going back to the State Department, what does that mean for the social impact in terms of education, in terms of health, for us as a country?
Thank you, Timothy. I think before I answer that, we need to put a few things in perspective. First of all, the whole concept of aid is built on the principle that the countries that are more affluent should do a little bit more to help those that are poorer than them. And of course, it comes from the whole understanding of the colonial legacy, and that those who are affluent are possibly affluent because of exploitation of the poor. So if they can maybe pretend or try to also assist the poor countries that are struggling, probably we shall bring them together. So it is a principle based on charity, but also a principle based on equity, okay? But then having said that, if we are now looking at the US now, I know we are talking about USAID because that's what affected us, but as Professor Suruma said, this is occurring right into the US. Today we are reading about universities trying to make a response to the state because they have cut NIH, and NIH mainly American universities that have been benefiting from federal funding in terms of research funding have been charging like 60 to 70% overheads. This helps to run the systems and everything. And the Trump administration has said we are cutting these indirect costs to 15%. Because universities, you have big endowments, you should run your own power, you should have your own administrators and janitors. We can't give you taxpayers' money to do the research, but also to run these other things. Because what do your endowments do? So that's that. But of course, the other principle we have to work with is that USAID was not established as a charity. It merged together all American different things, programs to do that. But the basic issue was the Cold War. So it was a political, ideological agenda of American control. But probably they have reached a level where they think either they don't need that type of soft power because they already have hard power. I think they're going to deal with Palestine. They've been talking hard there. But, or they have reached a point. But also when you hear the rhetoric, some of the things being said is, why do we take money from the poor in America to enrich the rich in poor countries? You have that. The other austerity measure they have done is, for example, slap taxes on Canadian goods entering America. So this regime is doing a lot of things. But where are we in this whole thing? To make sense of what is happening to us and globally, we can try to categorize aid in 3 things. One, there's humanitarian aid that responds to crisis.
Yes.
We have Ebola, we have monkeypox, HIV was a crisis. You also have different theaters of crisis in the world. So that kind of aid, I hope, will be reviewed and will be reestablished. Although we also have research which proves that sometimes that kind of aid also creates, you know, when you pour a lot of humanitarian assistance, especially post-conflict, in situations where there are no systems, you also create a corruption problem. Because people have to come, you know, there is an emergence of what we call crisis entrepreneurs who come up with more fictitious ways of consuming this kind of money and accounting for it. And that's why when you track many of these countries that have received aid post-war, you have a corruption problem, regardless of which part of the world they are in. The other kind of aid is development assistance. And sometimes this goes as budget support to Ramadan and to his colleagues and to all of us, budget support, but also development aid, which the PSST has said is sometimes passed on as non-budget support. That is very good. It helps us to develop, but sometimes the challenge with that is it makes the citizen exonerate the state. So the accountability is no longer to the state because people think we have an alternative to the state. So we don't care about Uganda government. You don't care about allegiance to Uganda government as a citizen because after all you have USAID. After all you have Welcome Trust. After all you have this, you have the other. So you also can create a problem where you have a citizen-state problem in that then the citizens do not support the state as much as they would except to critique it on where it has gone wrong. Why? Because they have an alternative funder who is the donor. Then of course you have the other kind of aid which has been coming to non-state actors, okay, to help them hold the state accountable. And initially, of course, we all believed that the non-state actors were doing a good job. But over time, we have had cases where these same non-state actors are held into accountability problems. We had a lot of that with DGF funding. Some people are still in court. You have a case where even the Trump administration itself is revealing how much money is going to this thing. For example, they released a statement, their money is not for empowering journalists elsewhere in the world. It's not for buying journalists. And they're saying, how does buying a journalist in another part of the world benefit us as the American people? How does, for example, buying $50 million worth of condoms for Gaza and Mozambique help the American people? So you have these different categories of aid and the different kinds of implications they have, because sometimes actually we ended up with a very aggressive civil society against the state, so that it goes to being beyond holding the state accountable to actually being very adversarial against state agencies, and sometimes this has not been good because it creates a disruption within the citizen-state relationship. But
Professor,
having said that,
just there where you are, wouldn't that warrant restructuring rather than freezing?
No, I'm coming to that. I think before we go to that, this should help all of us know and question what we have always thought, that the foreigner is more benevolent than the state. When most Ugandans speak and most people in developing countries, it's like Africa is doomed and elsewhere is okay. But having seen what is happening and Trump putting the interests of the American people at the forefront should help us know that these are not charities. They are not there for you. They are not there for the benevolent West vis-a-vis the corrupt other state. So what actually they are doing is to help us know that their interests come first. And like Godiba said, let us also put our interests first. But going beyond that, there are a number of studies that have shown that actually aid does not develop. And it is good, PSST said that it largely goes to social development actors. But also when you look at the social development indicators, most of them continue like that. It is only minimally that they improve. And then when you look, because the whole reason is that most of the aid funds consumption. And now, of course, they have started talking about capacity building. You will not get aid to put up big infrastructure in this country, not even for us small-time universities. They all want, okay, how many people want scholarships? That's the kind of thing. So at the end of the day, what is the kind of relationship that has helped countries develop? It is when you have markets, when you have trade, because the relationship between traders and people who are having that kind of relationship is much more partnership. This thing of saying development partners when actually all they are doing is dictate what you say And when you analyze the effectiveness of aid and you find there are loopholes, the first thing then they blame is corruption, bad governance, and so they put more money into resolving the corruption and bad governance issue and how the youth are the future, and therefore everyone else who is not a youth doesn't have anything to say. So that is part of the context we need to set as we are setting this discussion. And then we go to what you said. What does this mean? Of course, in the short term, it's going to be painful because there are people who have lost jobs. Whole families have lost jobs. People who have been on treatment have lost jobs. Some of this aid has been supporting livelihoods. But again, as everyone has said, it is in the long term, if we use this crisis well, it's the opportunity for us to rethink and say, okay, where did we go wrong? How come that we celebrate a donor giving piglets around the village and giving goats around the village, and we celebrate that as livelihood support? Can't PSST, through PDM, NPA, that agro-industrialization pillar, say how best can we develop these communities other than maybe the cash financial inclusion we are doing in PDM, so that people don't just become beholden to a donor because they were given piglets and a goat and turkeys. So I think this whole thing, it's painful in the short term. And I know the first time we lost this kind of aid with the Bahati bill, I know there are families that never recovered, because you're talking about CDC, you're talking about IDI. So there are families where heads of households became drunkards, and up to now they've never recovered because they lost their livelihoods. So in the short term, it's going to be very painful, but in the long term, it's an opportunity for the country to reflect. It's reassuring to hear from PSST that Uganda has always been prepared and that we have the capacity to take these shocks. But I think it is two-way. I think let us look at the opportunity this presents, not forgetting what Kwame Nkrumah said in the 1950s. If we don't develop these countries, the colonialist is going to come back, and we shall only end at flag independence. So have we been countries that have only had flag independence, that when you say it rolls back, we are all panicking? As President Uhuru said, it was their money, and they are planning for it. What is our problem?
Let me read some feedback that has come through so that we can continue this conversation. Good evening, Timothy. This is Ayebare Cosmas from Bunga. President Trump's policies on USAID and immigration should be spearhead a financial revival in Uganda and Africa at large. We should also make every penny count for the country, aim at practical education that helps low-income unemployed people, but also look forward to adding value to our products. I'm glad that the PSST is around, and I hope he can advise us on what fellow stakeholders to change the approach. Otherwise, we are doomed for disaster. You started well, you ended somewhere. Thank you, Timothy, for the show. This is Tumshabe Julius from Kampala and Masanafu. Sorry for diverting you a bit. My question goes to PSS. Okay, I'll read this during the break so that the PSST can be able to respond to that one. It's my pleasure watching from Buhara sub-county in Ndora in Kawa district. In regard to the new appointments, I credit them. To what we are speaking about, facilitation of the freezing there, I have questions. Is this foreign aid still stringing us along in neo-colonialism? This is Amon Cimenta. Thank you very much. This is a gentleman from Kanungu, Vinicius. He says, I think the withdrawal of USAID from Africa is not a problem. Why can't we live out aid? Why can't we live without aid? We can concentrate on our own and then wait for the Americans to support. When shall Africa use their heads and arms to move forward? Okay. Lastly but not least, congratulations to both the governor and the deputy. My mind and position is, given the young people that are in this country, can't we stir up development enthusiastically instead of people giving us money and lives and soliciting for retirement packages there? Okay. Finally, Jude from Chitende says, I think the US to cut off the support to us is a good thing. It's a wake-up call for us to stop sleeping and to learn how to support our economy and stop relying on the US. Let's take a break, and when we come back from this break, we'll be speaking solutions, especially looking forward to what we can do to become a self-sustaining economy. This and more after this break.
This PDM is to get all of you out of poverty. That's why we said 100 million per parish per year.
The parish development model is designed to eradicate poverty by providing the support necessary for financial independence.
We have seen how 1 million, how much 1 million can do. The whole of Uganda is very rich. So what you call poverty is actually ignorance. We need everybody to come up.
Let us all take advantage of the conducive prevailing atmosphere of political stability, peace and security to ensure that all our people come out of poverty.
And I've told the banks to stop deducting from the 1 million. You must get the 1 million full. The government is the one which will pay the bank charges.
Now the number of stools in this Matoke enterprise are 1,000. They are on 1 acre. And we harvest 17 bunches every day. The money that we get from this Matoke, after selling each bunch at 15,000 shillings, for the whole year, we get 91.9 million shillings. So I want to encourage all the people of Teso also to change the mindset and adopt to new crops which were not traditionally grown here.
We emphasize 2 words, wealth and jobs. This PDM is to get all of you out of poverty.
This message is brought to you by the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance.
Lillian! Lily flower!
Osmosis.
The cedar bus of beauty, the power bank of my heart, the sugar of my milk tea.
I'm glad you're here. Today buy for us some chicken.
No problem. You can eat whatever you want. I had already ordered. How much?
122.
122? Now, what if I take this one and this one? And can I also borrow this one? How much now?
When your money is not enough, don't hassle. We're sorting it with MTN Momo. Use the Momo app or dial *165 *5# to add call with Momo Advance and pay.
Our program of poverty eradication is a must. We want everybody to be involved.
Through the parish development model, Ugandans are starting small but impactful projects to improve their livelihoods.
When we give 1 million, we know it's not enough to do many things, but it's a starting point.
I'm a PDM beneficiary, a farmer. Your Excellency, I was given 1 million Uganda shillings from Kobil Kawo PDM Circle. Your Excellency, I got 20 bunches from my small piece of land sold, got 400,000, put in the PDM farm, Your Excellency, in the PDM money, Your Excellency, I bought a cow of 1,400,000.
In 1 year, 100 families in the parish you get. In 5 years, 500 families would have got.
We were the first people to receive money from Nakapriprit. I received $1 million. I rented 4 acres of land and I was able to harvest 14 bags.
So really this 1 million is enabling somebody to start something. Yes, and we don't want to give too much money to one person because we have got very many people to cover.
The parish development model empowers the people, focusing on lifting up the masses and creating opportunities that ensure prosperity for all. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I have a distinguished panel of Professor Sarah Sali, Godba Tumshabe, Dr. James Magara, Ramadan Gobi, and Professor Dr. Ezra Suruma. Let me read some of your feedback, then we'll get into our conversation here. At least I've told the PSS team what the private message was all about. I will send him the number too. This is Jamil from Koboko. He says, I know our government under President Museveni will manage this challenge. The only thing is that for citizens to adapt to the resilience model as they continue to support the country. Okay, thank you for the vote of confidence. We thank God for the team up there, two comrades that are speaking to the general public, and hope to be able to harvest as much knowledge as possible, being there to be qualified. This is Tumshabe Elise from Kabale. This is lengthy, but let me get bits of it. This is Muto from Bombo. He says, the rich panel of economic brains there, we're really grateful. We are heading into elections, as you mentioned clearly. Both the governor and the deputy, especially Professor Nwaga, worked very hard to get noticed with this appointment. It's rather timely because Uganda has started losing trust in the central bank. That said, there is a popular theory on the streets that money normally disappears at the central bank towards elections. Last elections, it was about 27 billion. It turns out that the first citizen had spent exactly that amount in 2 months in campaigns. Weeks ago, there was 60 billion heist. We're still waiting to see where it disappeared to. Finally, this is a gentleman from Butambala, Najib. He says, besides congratulating the former deputy and the deputy now, we cannot help but come up with robust strategies to cut down on the borrowing or the dependence. You say it is an example of being accepted and also positive to help us as citizens and the country to develop the capacity to fully utilize what we have and see where we fall. Why do we look at the best and keep crying for outside help, yet we can live on mechanisms within us to tussle it out? Greetings to the PSST. Okay, Dr. Ezra, let me come to you. A lot has been said, and there was a bit of a silver lining on this grey cloud. What opportunities does this freeze present to us as a country?
Yeah. I think it was Professor Sadi who talked about markets. The markets, in other words, our producing for markets is much more important than expecting money to come in the form of aid. So economic interdependence based on us selling our goods and buying whatever we need is far more important, in my opinion, so that access to the American market in the end will probably be a far better policy program for us. There have been problems with the AGOA, the program for accepting Ugandan goods without tariffs. But I think that that's the way to go. That this dependency and, you know, of course, when we were becoming quote unquote independent in the early 60s, we thought that we were really now going to be, you know, we don't need foreigners. But I think the term independence was misused. It should be, it's interdependence. All countries are interdependent. And the question is what kind of interdependence? And I think trade is a far better way of helping us to advance than donating to us. Because donations, they give you the impression that you don't need to work or money will keep coming, and now we get this shock, and it's clear that this is not the way forward. So my idea of colonialism and neo-colonialism is not totally misplaced. We are continuing to think that the foreigners are going to help us and they like us and they love us. No, I think we should get rid of these illusions and know that relations depend on trade, on economic relationships based on supplying real goods and services. I'm glad, for example, that our coffee production has gone up to 9-10 million bags from where it used to be 3. Our gold exports have increased. This is the way to go. Our oil is coming on. This is the way to go. This depending on handouts. We should forget about it. In fact, it shouldn't be history. Mr. Trump is helping us. He said, put this behind you and come to reality, which is that all countries depend on work and trade and real interdependence based on giving and taking, but not on donations. That's my takeaway.
Doctor, you talk about markets, you talk about trade, but you also hinted on AGOA, you hinted on protectionism in some of the regional countries here where eggs will not go, milk will not go. We have a surplus. The deficit is the markets and also the protectionism within the countries. There is also dumping. What practical ways can we have trade exchanged for aid?
A friend of mine has written a book, The Trade is War. It's not a straightforward. You produce a good and it goes. I remember not so long ago, I tried to send some products to China and they were all destroyed. And I had all the paperwork. But I continued, I have not given up. So it's not applying only to us. All the countries are involved in this struggle, in these wars. You see what Mr. Trump is telling the Chinese. He has slumped tariffs on them, even Canadians, even Mexicans, who are his neighbors. So what do you expect him to do to us? Probably put 50% on us, but still the struggle goes on. Of course, we know that we should be starting at home, regional market, the African market, and some progress has been made there. But even there, you can see that it's a struggle. Even within the region, within Africa, it is a struggle. But we can't give up the struggle because survival depends on producing and marketing. There, I don't see any alternative.
Interesting. Thank you very much. PSST, coming to you, I know you have a bit of responses to some of the comments that were made. When you look at the budget support, the development partners you have had, especially the US, in social areas like education and health, how are you going to respond to it to get us to a self-sustaining economy? Or as you say, the economy that works?
Thank you, Timothy. First of all, we have had a government which has almost predicted these trends in the past. And when you look at where the Professor Surumas have been and many others, of course led by the president, quite visionary, because I want to tell you, they supported entrepreneurs and scientists early enough to do certain things. Today, these ARVs we are talking about are produced in Uganda. We are not importing them. They are produced here. Now, imagine if you did not have them. How were they conceived and produced? By supporting directly our scientists and local entrepreneurs. In quality chemicals, they produce. We are now the ones exporting them, exporting to the various parts of Africa, these products and other commodities. We are now supporting scientists to produce vaccines. But sometimes I see people who are not looking far in the future asking, now, what are you trying to do? You're wasting money on some of these people. Supporting the professors, the Ponsiana and others to do the research and then support the entrepreneurs to go and multiply these into commercial enterprises. The testing kits, all these testing kits for malaria, for HIV, and now there are young people here producing them. Not very far, here in Intinda, and we are supporting them. as government, giving them tax rebates, giving them money to invest, getting them connected to markets here and elsewhere, of taking some of their products. NMS, the National Medical Stores, has a certain proportion of the budget now ring-fenced for our own people to produce. They're the ones who are producing these things. So when Mr. Trump says, no, 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 I'm stopping the support of these things in Uganda, that's why some of us are not losing a lot of sleep, because we have for kind of leaders who looked into this and put in place mechanisms of having self-sustainability. But also now we are saying, going forward, how do you ensure that first you add value to most of the things that we are doing, value addition, because we have these raw materials, how do we add value? Then two, how do we substitute some of the critical goods that we need in the economy? Not this, blind import substitution strategies which do not work, but being purposeful, selective, and you know that these are strategic items which you can't afford to just leave yourself. First of all, we are landlocked, therefore logistically very expensive. You need to do certain things. Now Uganda is self-sustaining in construction materials, in a number of agrochemicals, and so we have started producing them here. Sugar, we don't import sugar, we don't import food, in other words, generally. The economies are still facing that. Now, I want to briefly respond to Godiba. He talked about children not completing schools, for example, schooling. You know, Godiba, from today you need to start looking at these numbers with a pinch of salt, because as you know, ghosts don't sit PLE. Some of the challenges we've been having are really people, because of the way we put incentives against policy. We made a mistake of saying we are going to support education in terms of capitation grants basing on the number of children in the school. So, a number of those who are running schools, of people running schools, managing the schools, went and recruited ghosts. They go on dropping them. In a P1, you enroll 200 pupils. In a P2, you enroll about 400. In a P2, you drop out 50. In a P3, another 50. By the time now they're about to register, the actual number now comes. That started primary one, plus a few, of course, dropouts because of this and that. But it's not as bad as you may think. And we have already started to follow up these. We are going to carry out the entire validation of these numbers. Recently we did one on us, the public servants. You know, I went there. As you know, I entered government recently, about 4 years ago, less than 4 years ago. And I asked, because I was getting a lot of letters in my office requesting for wage, that we have a wage shortfall. Every entity wage shortfall, every district wage shortfall. So I asked my colleagues in public service, how many are we in public service? Nobody knew. Approximately, maybe this and that. I said, no, we must know ourselves. However much there is someone retiring every day almost, or whatever, we must know ourselves. So I told my minister, we need to go and get the services of the Auditor General to count us physically, all of us. If you are not there, you are off the payroll until you report yourself back. Maybe you are on a study leave or somewhere, you have traveled, get off. And they went and counted us. They brought a number, and now CID, police, is following up on those who had ghosts. Very soon you will see them in court. The people who had recruited the ghosts.
But PSST, just to add to Godba's, what you're responding to, when I look at the results of last year, about 700,000, upwards of 737.
Yeah.
When we looked at S4 last year, it was about 300 that sat S4. Get to S6, it's about 80,000. Makerere recently graduated 14,000. In total, they're about 40,000. Those gaps in there, I think those are the questions Godba is asking. If we track the ones who were in P1, they were about 2 million. If the president's COVID statements or speeches are to go by, there were 15 million students. So are they still ghosts? Should we start looking for ghosts, or exorcism needs to happen now?
No, I've told you the number of factors, but I say look at these numbers with a pinch of salt. Because sometimes you think this process is a linear one, that they enrolled 2 million, there should be 2 million sitting. No, that's not how it should be. But yeah.
When I look at the numbers,
yeah.
I've basically been using the statistical abstracts.
Yeah.
So every time I talk to government officials about this data, especially education and transition rates, everybody would say like, no, most of these actually could be ghosts because of the capitation grants. So until last year in May, when I had some work to do on one of my farms, on one of my coffee farms, and on a single day, I had 185 people working on my farm. Now, we are trying to develop a database for our workers, so we record everybody and try to do some biodata around them. So I was surprised that I saw the people who fall out of school. Because out of 185 workers, about 90% of them were women. Out of the 90%, 80% of them were young women, aged between 12 and 26 years. And then you could see all of them.
You are reporting yourself on TV that you did child labor.
In Africa, child labor is about 9 years. For us, we started working at 7 years. But the point I wanted to make is that when you record all the education level of these children, of these people, actually they are no longer children, most of them are P3, P4, and P5 dropouts. Now, for me, I could relate it to the UBOS statistical abstracts data, which shows that actually the highest dropout rates are in P3, P4, and P5. So for me, I was like, this looks like evidence. In as much as it's anecdotal, it really confirms the way the data is produced in the statistical abstracts. So I think for government, you would want to probably do a much more methodical, assessment of most of these people that because they are there. I saw them and I was like, okay, this is something that government needs to pay attention to.
I've told you we are going to do a similar exercise to what has happened in our on our payroll to establish how many children do we have in school and how many children are reported by the census. And then where are these children who are missing? Not in school, but also not in employment. Where are they? And it becomes an easier way of doing a policy to also get them in that basket. The other issue you talked about was the need for us. You were saying perhaps we are not doing it the Musk and the Trump way in a cutting government spending and so on. I wanted to let you know, Godby, that actually budget repurposing now is a new normal in Uganda here. For the past 3 years, we've encouraged ourselves to repurpose money from consumptive, wasteful, less value-adding places or areas to more pro-people and wealth-creating areas. I want to tell you that in beginning the year 2020 to 23 financial year, we repurposed money from areas like travel abroad that we cut by half. Vehicles, up to today, we restrict vehicle purchase, plus of course fuel, workshops, consultancies. Maybe that's why you are finding it a little bit difficult. Retooling, welfare and entertainment, and so on and so forth. And out of this repurposing, we raised 1.7 trillion shillings in that period. 1.7 trillion within the budget. The money you are seeing financing parish development model was gotten from the budget. We got $1 trillion plus and other monies to facilitate the secretariat. And now I want to tell you that parish development model is revolutionizing villages. As I always say, time will tell, we shall compare notes. You are going to, because when recently, for example, Bank of Uganda, they were presenting to us in the board the state of the economy report. You see that this growth of Uganda, you know now, is one of the fastest growing economies in the region. Yeah. It has recovered faster, growing. And they were interrogating in their model, what is driving this growth? That PDM. That PDM, among others, you know, is driving growth because it is bringing people who are out of the economy into the economy, and that is growth automatically. And where did we get this money from? This work of Elon Musk. So we did the Elon Musk already here in Uganda before. Yeah. Finally, I wanted also to really, I can't leave this point, to say that from all of this we are talking about, how America is reducing money and whatever, Uganda now, we finance up to 98% of our budget from either our tax revenue or from the money which we borrow and pay back. Do you think all the grant is a very small component of our national economy? Of course, the off-budget support is there, but you know I can't track it. I don't know how much is it. Sometimes they tell you we are bringing you a lot of money. I had my friend, we had become a good friend, but now he left, Richard Nixon. I'm sure the guys from USAID who are watching know him. We used to have very, I said, Richard, why don't you bring your money? Yeah. So that I can help you to track it. Because you might be making a mistake of allowing those people you are giving this money to use mine of government to account to you, and also to use yours to account to me. And we all fail. Yeah. Richard said, government policy over America, no money passing through government. So we don't know actually by certainty those numbers. We can't put them. That's why, therefore, for us, because we realize that we need to cater for ourselves, now we are saying, please, ATMs, agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral-based industrialization, and STI, science, technology, and innovation. We are putting all our resources in these strategic bets. We are calling them the strategic bets to drive growth. And once the economy grows, all of these other things we are discussing about or is agonized about, a growing economy solves most of the issues. It has less sick people. You will need more entertainment because they want to go and spend money. It has more healthier people actually, more educated children. These children we are talking about dropping out of school. Some of them drop out because they are afraid to get an exercise book. You know, the parent says, no, you come and cultivate. Now, once those households are having incomes, household incomes, that's why we are emphasizing household income, jobs, and services. The normal services, health care, education, water, clean water, and so on and so forth. That's where we are putting emphasis, and producing those goods which are critical for Ugandans, and we don't rely on donors. We don't rely on good Samaritans, because there are no such people like good Samaritans. They always come with certain interests to serve. And therefore, we don't want to put the lives of Ugandans in the hands of just, you know, good Samaritans and prayers. We should pray, but as we pray, we have ways of earning from our sweat. And that's what we are facilitating now through these various programs.
Thank you. Dr. Magara, you mentioned foreign policy, especially for America there. But when you look at this freeze, what does it mean for especially the soft power that Godba talked about on the global scene, but also being that now Africa is the beacon that everyone is looking at? What does that mean for its influence? What does it mean for especially the soft power it has had over Africa?
I was quite intrigued reading the document by the Trump transition team. As I mentioned, about 28 pages, very interesting reading. And it's quite clear that soft power has not gone away. Actually, now the battle, in the 60s, it was a battle between the US and USSR at the time. Now it is China. And it comes out several times in that document, saying that the last 4 years, basically the previous administration went to sleep. It was putting its money in the wrong places. And as a result, China came in. Now, it's there, it's all over. Africa is mentioned, Asia, all these different, Latin America is mentioned, and so on. So now the thing which I found also interesting, well, it's to be borne out, but the direction seems to be self-reliance. It comes out a few times that that nations, even what so-called third world nations, should be helped to be self-reliant. And if that is borne out, then it's an opportunity for us. Because they're saying instead of making them dependent on us, we should be encouraging programs that enable them to run themselves. So how that will play out is yet to be seen. But that seems to be an opportunity. There's a book by Dambisa Moyo, which has been quite popular, called Dead Aid. And in that book, she argues that if you were to cut out aid from Africa, come back 5 years later, Africa will develop. And she gives some examples, very good examples in that book of times when Kenya, for example, was off the aid basket, and they actually did so well. The multilateral organizations came back to convince them to take more money, which unfortunately they did. So the whole thing of aid, and I'm glad that these revelations are actually coming out in the open. Some of these were whispers, but now it's quite clear. It's been out there, that aid has been used as a tool to underdevelop or make sure that these nations are controlled. Another interesting book is The Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, in which he brings out, in that book he talks about detailed things they did in, in these countries to make sure that the money that went out was actually a revolving door. It's said to be aid, but it just crosses the street in, Washington somewhere. So I think we, knowing Trump's character and what he has done in the past and how he has begun, I think we should just brace ourselves for more shocks. I don't think this is the end. We are going to have shock after shock, and hopefully we can respond properly and take advantage of this time to step out. Now, some thoughts. So that's what I see happening on the from what I'm seeing happening on the global scene, and even as Godber said, if you followed the speeches, it was very clear. It was very clear what they were planning to do. What shocked people was the speed at which they did it. But they have been saying it all along. They've been saying things about the currency. That's another thing coming. I've been listening about a lot of things about which might be of some benefit to us in the way that money is given out across the world and how money has been used. And we also need to appreciate that they themselves are fighting their own battle with the other powers that control the world. So I believe, personally, I'm very positive. I think we need to tie ourselves up for a roller coaster ride. But I'm glad hearing from Ramadan here that what government has already been doing, we are on that right track. And if this is held true, the other things that need to happen, I mean, apart from increasing our income, export has been mentioned, things like diversification, which has been happening over time, and education, things that need to happen there as well. So education is focused to us. We're still running on a colonial kind of pattern, which really doesn't produce human resource that is tied in with the opportunities we have in this country. Once we do that more, then we'll have a more productive human resource. Right now, you walk around many of our villages, people are playing games, you see able-bodied young men not doing anything. I had some visitors from Germany some time back, and they were coming to Uganda for the first time. And they kept asking, what are those people doing? What are those people? They could not believe that. And I got irritated, actually, until one time I visited Austria, and my host took me through the town, and there was no one. I mean, literally no one in town. I asked where the people said they've gone to work. This town comes to life in the afternoon. So you see a country that has put its human resource to use. So education will need to tie into that. And I'm not necessarily talking about the classroom education. But even the school dropouts can be educated to be productive. Yeah, sure. They don't have to get degrees and certificates. So that kind of focused approach will, and with the PDM, what we're hearing, if you get these village people now beginning to get productive, they enter the economy. So those sort of things will help to increase our income as a country. I want to talk a bit about, as an entrepreneur, the issue of the tax base. Ramadan mentioned we are getting a lot of our money from the taxes. And, I pay my taxes. But sometimes you feel like, the tax man is strangling you because the tax base is too narrow. I do hope that all these PDMs will also be paying taxes, there are people who just don't pay taxes in the country. They're getting a free ride. And the few who are taxpayers are, and that's very discouraging. I know the policy, if you have a second job, third job, you're taxed. Basically, it's like you're not supposed to work more. The more you work, the more they tax. So why should I do more work? And then if that is now taken and given to people who are not working, you're just working, shooting yourself in the foot. So I do hope there will be reviews on some of the tax policies to ensure that the tax policy is incentivized. One of the positive things I found out recently was visiting the one-stop center. Because we've been complaining, taxes for foreigners, only taxes, but actually it's just because we don't know. I went and sat with the director, and they were very, very receptive. And they actually, there are tax incentives for Ugandan businesses. And I realized, actually, I qualified. I just didn't know. You can get a 10-year tax holiday. So there are things like that and that's an incentive now. Because now, if the incentive is now taken up by the local entrepreneurs, you get more productivity. But on the contra side, the things we need to watch, one of the mega things everyone talks about is corruption, because it's a major bleeder. And it's very disheartening for those who work honestly and pay all their taxes to see that money go out and, you know, you just hear money disappear. It's very, very disheartening. And you wonder, why, what am I paying for? So that has to be dealt with. I know it's on everyone's lips. I do hope that we'll see a lot more action as has been promised, so that those who actually work hard, they see the value for their money and they appreciate it. And it's less painful to pay the tax. But when you see money wasted, and then next time they are threatening you with letters, you know, this is the third warning, you wonder, you know, why am I doing this, you know? So there are things on the reducing expenditure side and the things on increasing income. I think value addition has already been mentioned as a major one. I think the other thing that probably I'll end with is something that is becoming, not being talked about, it's been talked about much, but we're going to see the benefit of it. This whole emphasis on science and innovation. There's a lot of work. I happen to know people working in STI. There's a lot of positive work going on there, which we are yet to see the impact, but it's certainly coming. Yes.
You mentioned something before I get to Godba about education, because let's leave Godba's farm of 12 to 26 there. But there is that group of young people that PSST cannot see either paying tax or in school, but they're lingering there. How do we educate them? How do we get that to be productive and get into the markets that Dr. Surma is talking about?
Part of the low-hanging fruit is agriculture. Now, but agriculture has to be, it's not just going and doing subsistence agriculture. PDM is doing a bit of that. I happen to know somebody else who has got into very short training programs, mindset change, and then a skill, and then some support. That is really low-hanging fruit. But there have been other skilling initiatives. I'm not sure how well they've done. One of the unfortunate things with the colonial education system we got was the emphasis on head knowledge. And today we all across, most people, whether they would want their kids to have degrees and so on, all of us wanted that. But you find somebody training for 12, up to 22, 23, and they have no job. A lot of money has been invested. If you go back 200 years after, or if you were here 200 years ago, because the population was much smaller, there was no unemployment. Because the approach was you learn a skill. If you're a farmer, if you're a fisherman, you're a hunter, everybody was unemployed. But we lost it at some point when we adopted another education system, which now put emphasis on certain types of knowledge. So even those who have been educated can do something, but you want a job. So there has to be a mega shift in the way we approach this whole thing of education and helping citizens become productive. There are things that, and we have a lot of natural resources too. That's why I talk about connecting what we have, the opportunities in the country. Why is it that with all the potential, I forget what the World Bank said, something like $9 billion per year of tourism. It was a study done some time back. I can't remember the exact figure. There's very little. We are depending on most of these things are run. Maybe now it's different. There's a time when most of them were run by foreigners. That opportunity is not being taken by Ugandans. Where are the schools training people for the tourism industry? The one we had, one of the major government ones was closed, one in Jinja. That should be a mega focus. So some of these people who drop out of school can go into those, they become tour guides, and those people make a lot of money, you know, work in the hotel industry and so on. The whole thing of minerals, we have large number of minerals. Again, I forget the exact number, but minerals that have been found that are actually commercially viable. Where are the schools that are training people to go into that area, or depending on foreigners to come and be driving that area? So there are many opportunities in the country, but they're not connected with the education system. So it's people who either drop out of school or don't go to school, or foreigners who say, you know, this is an opportunity. But the education we have has locked us into a job, and anything you do is side, and yet the side thing may become the main thing. So there is a lot of thinking to do there, and there's been effort. but there's a lot more effort that needs to go in connecting our people to the opportunities that are at home. I am always amazed when I'm flying back into the country to see the number of foreigners coming to the country. How do they survive here? What do they see which we don't see? And yet, when you're flying out with a lot of Ugandans leaving the country. You're flying back in, and there are a lot of, you wonder, what is going on? You know? There's something we don't see. So there's a lack of connect, and it means some radical changes. Yes, there are people who will go and do the high-skill jobs, but what do we do with these other people? What can we expose them to take advantage of the local opportunities? But agriculture is still a very big opportunity here. Not just agriculture per se, but the value addition, going up the chain. And maybe the last thing I would say is, with all this, I'm hoping, one of the things I'm hoping will happen is that we'll have some dismantling of the international system. So Trump may look like a madman, but I hope he uses his madness correctly, because there are certain things that lock us out deliberately. I always laugh when I hear Africa contributes 2% of global trade. And I just say, lock up Africa, make sure nothing goes out, and let's see what the world will do.
Okay.
No.
But let me come to you. Something that Dr. Magara mentioned. First and foremost, the influence of Elon Musk, the Department of Efficiency. I saw him besides the president speaking with his chest there. But let's also look back to the elections, some of the speeches you spoke about. The swing state of Pennsylvania, when it had no internet and Starlink was sent there. When you look at his influence, then you also look at the East coming to Russia and China. Is this an opportunity for them to take advantage of, especially in the domain of humanitarian aid?
No, first of all, the one thing I also want to add is that I think in the last 2 days, Trump signed an executive order exempting American companies from the restrictions on bribing foreign leaders. Yeah? So that's when he has opened. So in other words, if there are companies that want to come and do business here and elsewhere, they are free to bribe. Yeah, because that was there was a restriction on those companies. And that is again competing with China.
Yes.
Because the assumption is that China actually does this big time, probably, and all the other countries. But of course, I mean, Elon Musk is a very interesting guy in the sense that he was, I think he's a very, very strategic guy. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, shrewd businessman, but I also think shrewd politician. Because he bought Twitter,
yes,
or X. Nobody probably anticipated that he wanted to use it for politics. Yeah. And I was very intrigued when he was being asked whether he was considering buying TikTok. And he said, no, he doesn't buy these things for making money. So I was like, okay, this really makes sense to me. So Elon Musk controls this media platform that probably has the biggest influence now on the global politics. And I think that he's going to use this. Some of the discussions have been in the US has been that Trump normally doesn't want someone to be in the limelight above him. But I think Elon Musk also has this infrastructure that it may be even risky for Trump to try to disengage Elon. Because if you don't want Elon Musk to be against you for all intents and purposes. So I think that I think we need to start from there. But what is happening in the US, China, Russia, does it offer us an opportunity? My view is that it does. It did a long time ago. It does now, and it does in the future. But more importantly, it depends on how we are organized internally. Yeah, my view is that it doesn't depend so much on what these guys do. I think it depends more on what we do. In most cases, we are playing a catch-up game. So Ramadan, on growth, so you'll deal with the macroeconomic growth. The figures The GDP growth figures are good. The industrial growth figures are good. Now, you can run into a problem where you are not able to address the question of equity. In other words, you are having the economy concentrating in just the top 1%, top 10%. But so your growth figures are looking very good. And then poverty is very pervasive. So in other words, the capacity of the population that you have to be able to drive production in terms of market is very limited. So I think that for us, especially as Uganda and many other African countries, we have to be able to look at the micro, the internal dynamics of this population. What is this population? So when you look at, I interact with what you would consider the working class, middle class type people. But you see the stress that we're all going through in terms of being able, especially the fees and the health expenditure. The stress is real. And it cuts across generally. And the fees is not only coming from the cost of school fees in terms of the figures charged by the schools. It's also coming from, and it's also not coming from our biological children. It's like each one of us must be looking after some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
dependents.
You are looking after a complete family. And I think that has a significant stress on the economy, the way, because many of us who look after these people, we are actually supposed to be the entrepreneurs. So the money we're supposed to invest to be able to create new businesses and new jobs and new opportunities, we are using it to look after these people. So that's why I think that you guys in the government have to more or less like come down the elevator and be able to begin to look at the things that we ordinarily would not look to in economic terms. So for some of us who are not economists, we look at these people, the Munyagwa Mubaraka calls us everyday people. No, they are people, the guys who tell us that inflation is controlled. It's a good indicator, and I think it's good for the economy. But inflation will not put food on, low inflation is not, for me as an everyday person, is it the one putting food on my table? Has it enabled me to pay fees for my child or for my dependents? So you would say those the ones who are dealing with those figures can easily have comfort because the figures are reading good. I think the second point that I would make that for us as a country to deal with the Trump crisis, because the Trump I think is going to create a crisis for these 4 years. I think it's going to be a crisis. Whatever the group has done, because the group around Trump is very I wouldn't use the word erratic. I think they are very strategic. They are very radical. Yeah. So they are going to do this over the next 4 years. Maybe up to 2020. When are the midterm elections going to be? 2026? About 2026. They could do it depending on how they operate. Maybe they could lose one of the houses in 2026. So there could be a break. But as long as they are in charge, they are going to be very, very disruptive. And I think that's where we need to really now to be targeting and say, we are going to be disrupted. And you see, every single day they are coming up with something, something new. So I think that for us now as a country, as a government, we need to be looking at actually more disruptive agenda in terms of the way we organize it. Because you see, I think Uganda's problem is not a policy problem. Well, these guys in finance, in NDP, in Bank of Uganda, I think they are top notch. Yeah. When you look at the way they articulate the policy problem and the solution, our problem is more structural and political. Now, those are the things that policymakers normally will not attend to, because to deal with the structural problems, you need to deal with the political problem, which is not the domain of policymakers. So, I think that even for the efforts by people like Ramadan and others who are in that ecosystem, for them to be optimized in terms of how we address the challenges we face, we need to engage in more structural and political reforms of a disruptive nature. Because I think that the politics drags things. We are not able to do them with speed, with efficiency. We have to be able to do that. I'm not sure that the current regime has the capacity to be able to innovate around it. There are structural issues. I'll give you one which is more policy related, is like the local governments. Because the local governments, whether you dress it like how, those are dysfunctional structures. In terms of the return on investment, I don't think that you have the return that you would get. If there was any reform that I would recommend, Ramadan, I would say, I want every report that we do. Let us, I come from Ntungamo. Let's have the GDP of Ntungamo. Let's have the output of Ntungamo. Because even when we say coffee production has gone up, Ntungamo is a coffee district. How many tons of coffee? We have the largest factory now. You see? Now, I think the kind of structural reforms I would want to see is to say, so I want to look at Ntungamo with the level of, my level of microscopic exactness of what is happening in Ntungamo, in terms of economic activity, in terms of employment, in terms of entrepreneurs, because I think there are many districts where if you zeroed in, you can actually increase efficiency and productivity by just organizing things there. But man, I can tell you, if you went and asked the agriculture officer in Ntungamo to tell you what is produced in Ntungamo, what lives out, and for a district like Ntungamo, it is very easy because you are coming to even Kaware or Rukunje. These are districts that are heading to Kampala. So I can put a roadblock somewhere, and even if I just count lorries of matoke, I know at least on a daily basis so many lorries come out of this district, or trucks of coffee. So in other words, the point I'm trying to make is that even as we celebrate the macroeconomic figures that really are very impressive, we need to go we need to go inside the system, the ecosystem, and be able to understand it so that we can cause the kind of disruption that we need to. Because I always say Uganda is a country that still needs shock therapy. I think for my view is that we are developing in a circle, given the endowment we have in terms of people, in terms of resources. We are developing in a circle. So when you look at the circle and you want to assess your progress, you are clocking a lot of mileage. So in other words, if you are looking for success stories, you will see many success stories. But the things that we need to do are the ones where you are able to cause discomfort in the circle, so that then people start moving in the forward direction. Does PDM do that? I think, yeah, I think it's more of, PDM is good for me in terms of the building the base, but in terms of the radical transformation, because some of us, rather than we are looking at our age, we want this socio-economic transformation to arrive during our lifetime. so we are looking at, okay, what are the things that you can do? The investment in science and technology. I mean, that's real.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Professor, a lot of disruption from Godba, a lot of low-hanging fruit from Dr. Magara. Young people both in the sector, health, education, what opportunities can we disrupt this aid that has just been frozen for us to be able to see maybe light at the end of the tunnel? Where's the light?
Indeed, there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. Thanks, Timothy. But I think what everybody is saying is that it is an opportunity for us to rethink the path we have been taking.
Yes.
And I think in this disruptive path we've been taking, and I mean with the disruption on the path we've been taking, I think a lot of your questions will be answered. And from each time I go to villages, one thing I always say, as a social scientist is to find what has changed and what has remained the same. When we would go to villages as younger people, you had skills that were in the village. For example, there was a tailor who tailored, even made mosquito nets, the four-sided ones, and everybody had a mosquito net in the house. You had a carpenter on the village, you had a porter, but you also had agriculturalists on the village, people who worked and farmed and lots of animals and that kind. What amazes me is going back, each time you go back, is how those skills are not even there. You can't have, no one has a clue on how to make a mosquito net because we've been getting them free from Ministry of Health, and if you're tired of them, you turn them into keeping chickens or into wedding gowns. But the issue is that skill got lost. The skill for carpentry got lost. So if we all remember where we were when we were growing up and what we have now, villages don't have those basic skills. So kids are just there. Of course, they are betting, they are drinking, they're on mobile phones, and now they're going to go and campaign, so they are going to form the masses that go around because they know that politicians are going to give them money. The standing allowance, the moving allowance, the listening allowance, because they're not going to come to your rally and live without listening. So there are all these allowances that go around. So that's where the younger people are. So the social transformation has occurred, but in the wrong direction. So we need to turn it around. And of course, the other thing which amazes me going to villages is how houses are very food insecure. Traditionally, households were never food insecure. The social norms that were built into what it meant to be a man, into a household head, into being a mother in that home, really rotated on stability, on provisioning, and ability to survive. Now you go to many households in villages, everyone is begging. Even those who are sitting on tracts of land are begging. So that becomes another challenge. And then, of course, we were asking what are some of the skills that we can latch on. And of course, it's true, most of what we have as head knowledge is not a problem. I mean, it's not very useful because all of them are trained for a job and many of these jobs are not there. But there are initiatives the country is trying to work with. For example, we have those that are looking for skills at the level of tertiary, and that's the State House Investors Protection Unit is also mapping what skills are these institutions producing and what additional skills do we need. Then you come to the National Curriculum Development Center. They had a committee set up by Parliament which is looking at skills, needs, anticipation. Their role is to anticipate what skills are going to be needed 10 years, 20 years. And the advantage with NCDC is that they are working with a 16-year-old dropout. Because in their assumption is that many people drop out of the education sector at 16. So whether someone is going to drop out to be a Rolex, making Rolex, or frying something, or making something, what would they need to learn? So they are trying to build that. It's still early days. They're still doing benchmarking, but hope something will come out. But to go back to what do we do with the younger people now? I believe the PDM is a very good strategy. And why is it a good strategy? One, you have the production, storage, processing, etc., which would work with that. And of course, then you have the one on infrastructure and economic development. Then you have the one on information management system. If we just took 3 of those 7 pillars and said, how can we kickstart a few of those? Because indeed, you go to villages, you find everyone has farmed tomatoes. If you went back 2 weeks later, the tomatoes are a heap and they are rotting. Why? There's no market, but also there was no way of processing and storing that. And the same happens to maize because the whole skill of granaries also got lost. So there's a lot we have lost. But what can we do around this? I think for me, going by what Dr. Magara said, that agriculture is the low-hanging fruit, one of the things we need to do, and maybe working with the district production officers, is extension. We know we lost extension because structural adjustment decided to privatize and liberalize. Those of us who have tried farming, one of the biggest things is, you know, the issue within agriculture is there are so many externalities. You're not going to have a very beautiful garden and banana grove when your neighbors farming bananas nearby don't have extension because the weevils will move. These are airborne things. You're not going, like if you try to keep animals, one of the things you do if you're going to keep animals, we try to keep animals, is you must have food production. So you have to turn a bit of the land into producing the napier grass and whatever they're going to feed on. But then you have the workers focusing on the animals. When you're away, The other people want the breed you have, so they are going to bring in these other animals to get an advantage. So you end up with all your animals falling sick, but no one will tell you, except if you put cameras, but no one will tell you that anything stray came in.
Yes.
But also beyond that, the other villagers will come into your gardens to feed, and they tell you cannot cure about grass. So the whole thing of community mobilization, the whole thing of production, but it boils down to extension, because in the past these things worked.
Okay.
There were social norms on boundaries, there were social norms on respect. So maybe the next stage we have to do is work with the production officers and say, how are you making these communities productive? If that does not happen, all of the youth are going to move in urban centers because there's nothing for them in the villages, but equally there's nothing for them in the cities. You're going to have crime.
Thank you very much. Let me read some feedback so that we can have parting shots from the panel here. This is quite lengthy. This is a gentleman, Dan Masiko Malcolm from Bushenyi. He has quite a number of points, and I'll read the last three. He says, number 3, we discovered that almost 25 years ago, up to date, revenue generation from the ventures was vague or vaguely managed. Uganda's economy by the NRM Bush War, the economics of political patronage. The government in power has been wasting time for 40 years. Now Dr. Surma and the PSST are in front of us lamenting that the key direction of this economy yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The solution lies in voting out corruption, poverty, and joblessness. Okay? He says, number 4, locally produced remedies are the alternatives. Multivitamins, tasked by Professor Ogenga Ogwang, things like Covidex, his colleagues in science, technology, and development. I think you agree with the PSST on that one. Someone else sends in a message, I'm streaming from Kawempe. Foreign aid is a weapon used by donors to drive their objectives, particularly to recipient countries. It's high time we adjust and aim for self-reliance. Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, Uganda is endowed with a lot of product and tourism, fish, organic agriculture, and products like that. Believe it or not, the procedure will cover our shortfall in the course of the USAID cuts. Okay. Otema George from Naguru. I want the PSS to be able to answer on service delivery, on health. He says, what does he say about the Luwa Hospital? Government policy and opposed to business. Okay. The final one is a gentleman that has sent it here. Kenneth says, I would like the PSS to respond to why bank rates are reduced, why the CBR reduces, but bank rates don't reduce. What we need to be done is to have a single digit of interest rate so that we can be able to borrow money. In the US, USAID is for profit as implementing partners. There is also contractors who were demanding payment from USAID, implementing partners to whom they haven't provided services. Our parliament's petition to the US ambassador to get people paid, okay? And finally, this is Honorable Ken Luchamzi. I'm impressed by the wealth of ideas emanating from the panel. In order to address Trump's actions on the program squarely, we are drastically reducing public expenditure by adopting regional government order to reduce corruption and duplication of services. Congratulations to my friend, Professor Nwagaba. This is Ken Luchamzi, the man, the president of the Conservative Party. Okay. I'll give each of you 2 minutes. I'll start with Professor Godba, Dr. Magara, PSST, and finally, Dr. Surma. 2 minutes start here with Professor.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to agree with the comment that talked about we should pursue self-reliance. And how do we do this? A few points. 1, we should reduce the cost of agriculture. It's the low-hanging fruit we have. 2, we should explore markets other than depending on aid. And I know there will be a lot of tariffs and controls to markets outside Africa. It's an opportunity for us to explore markets on the continent. We have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Many of us are not yet trading in it because we have not yet met the principle of origin. Why haven't we met the principle of origin? Because we don't have enough processing and production in our own countries. So if we can work on that, take advantage of continental trade, they are trying to open up so many roads to connect one coastline to another. I think that should be the future for Africa so that we don't remain as flag independence countries. Thank you.
Flag independence was very interesting. Over to you, Godba.
Two quick things. I want to recommend to Ramadan and your minister that you constitute some working group, task group of you people in government and us in the private sector that almost on a monthly basis look at these countries, US, China, Russia and others, and how they, in other words, deal with the geopolitics of development in this and the impact on this region. That, in other words, beyond yourselves in government, that you are able to get cross-fertilization of ideas of what these countries are planning, what is likely to come in the future. The second point, really, that I want to end with the skilling. Sarah talked about this, and I think one of the biggest wastage that we are having, with all due respect, is this thing that government calls presidential skilling initiatives. That's one of the biggest waste that we have, because you don't get people and get like 1,000 people, put them in a room and say we have trained. Again, I learned from my experience working on the farm. I got these people coming to work, then I realized we don't have coffee farm workers. All I had was casual laborers who don't understand how to grow coffee, why they are doing things they are doing. So if there was any skilling that needs to be done now, my view is that it needs to be done actually by these private sector people who are running businesses. People should be trained either on the farms or in the hotels, in the what, to be able to get the skills of doing business. But the amount of money that is being pumped into these things called presidential skilling initiatives, I think that's one of the biggest waste that we have right now as a country.
Thank you. Yeah. Dr. Makara?
Well, thank you very much. I'm personally delighted that this crisis is forcing these discussions, and it's bringing to the fore issues that have been simmering underneath for a long time, maybe suppressed. Judging from what I've been following happening the other side of the Atlantic, I don't think this is going to stop. And what is come across very clearly is that these people are out to change the way things are. My hope is that we will take advantage of the opportunities this presents and address the challenges we have. I think it's an opportunity for us to break free. I'm glad there are already things happening in the country, but maybe even more among the elites. There's been a bit of the disconnect with government. That it is their thing. When we think getting older now, you begin having children, grandchildren, we've got to leave the country a better place for the next generation. And if we don't put our effort to it, it's now even clear that what's happening in other parts of the world, there will be no place for our kids to run to. No. So we have got to solve the problems. As I said earlier, there is no one. I've not yet seen anyone around here who's busy developing their neighbor's plot. It doesn't happen. And if you look at countries, they come to help, but they're not going to solve our problems. We have to solve the problems ourselves. So I do hope that this season will be a very strong wake-up call that will help us move in the right direction. Yeah,
thank you very much. PSST.
Thank you, Timothy. I think, first of all, to my friend Godba, when you say, are we going to eat inflation? We emphasize inflation, GDP. I want to tell you, yes, you eat inflation. If you want to prove that you eat it, let it increase into double digits. You will appreciate it. I remember when Dr. Suruma was still Minister of Finance, had a task in Parliament. Someone said, actually, you Suruma, you are always talking about GDP. Are you going to eat GDP? I was still a teacher of economics. I used to tell my students, if I were Professor Suruma, I would have told those members of Parliament, yes, you eat GDP. Secondly, you are right on the GDP at a sub-national level. Getting, for example, understanding how each district is creating wealth. With something which there were some guys who had started it, researchers from the US. They use satellite and the lights to measure, to estimate U-boats perhaps in the future, as we build the capacity, we shall also try it. The caller who, your person who talked about Lubowa Hospital, yes, it's progressing very well, and in a few months to come, you will see Lubowa Hospital on the ground. The CBL and lending rate, somebody I think is not seeing very well how the CBL, change in the CBL is translating into a lower lending rate. To reduce the lending rate substantially, it has reduced actually a bit, although not as fast as it should be, but to reduce it substantially, we need to deepen the financial sector. All of us, we need to save more and longer term, but not the way we are behaving today. Life is short, let me enjoy, you save in the morning, you are withdrawing in the afternoon. You will not have the lending rate reducing. And finally, I wanted to ask you, Godiba, you seem to dislike everything the president does. Why?
Which ones now?
We'll keep that conversation for another day.
Thank you.
Lastly, Dr. Suruma.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trump is a Republican, and the Republicans really believe in the private sector. But now you can see he's in the public sector, and now we are not sure how the relationship between the public and private sector is working, but I'm sure he will be, you can say, is disrupting the public sector in order to increase,
to boost the
prepare for increase in the private sector. Let us respond by defining more precisely and more radically the relationship between our own public sector and private sector. This relationship is critical to development. Thank you for PDM. The government is reaching down to the village. Now the people in the village, in the parish, they need institutions to help them manage that 100 million. So, Mr. PSST, sir, let that 100 million become capital of the parish, properly managed by an institution that is qualified to manage it, so that 100 million and then another 100 million next year, and after, all this money now will be capital of the parish, and will solve the problem, which is the #1 economic problem of our people, which is lack of capital.
Okay.
But if that 100 million is allowed to be wasted, consumed, then we are not going anywhere. Thank you very much for the effort, but let's find a way to ensure that this 1 trillion you have saved, 1.3 I think you said, you have saved, becomes real savings in economics, is what makes capital possible. So let's make sure that this becomes capital. And with these few words, I have an announcement. I would like to provide something for the parish people here. I want to congratulate my brother Timothy on your birthday. I want to congratulate my sister,
This is
Sarah. Please come forward. Okay. Congratulate you on your promotion to becoming a full professor at the most prestigious institution in our country. I hope that I'm not
congratulating me for being in
the program. Please come forward and let us enjoy this. This is not from Trump. This is from ourselves. It's homemade, and glory be to God.
Amen.
Professor.
Can we take the picture before we cut?
I can take the photo. Ah, he'll take the photo.
First photograph the cake before we cut it.
Okay. Both of you
So we are
cut
both
the cake.
cutting.
Yeah.
Are we singing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Congratulations.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you.
Happy birthday and happy promotion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I
Thank
think
you.
we shall leave the show for. So we'll end the show with this quote. I don't even remember the quote, but until a lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Of ignoring or sanctioning him now?
The position that they're in, if you look at France, the UK especially, to some extent Germany, the leaders have all put themselves in a position which suddenly has become untenable. Their position was, we're just going to drive until we not only oust Russia from any of the Ukrainian areas, the Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, but we're going to break up Russia. That has been the goal, is to break Russia into various pieces. And suddenly, with the recession that is ongoing in Europe, these leaders are looking like they're yesterday's news because it's so impractical. And I think at this point they're saying, okay, the United States they're gonna shut this down. They're just not going to stand for it. And so you have, you had France and Britain very intent on just driving this war to its ultimate conclusion. It's not going to happen. And so I think what you're going to see is this peace talk is going to lift up the conservative elements, the AfD party in Germany,